Welcome back to Rise and Tell with Sheekha. I am Sheekha Singh, your host and author. I have got something special to share. My brand new book, Unburnable Ambition, How Overachievers Win Without Burning Out, is coming on Jan 5th, 2026. This book is for all of us who dream big but refuse to let burnout be the price. If you'd like early chapter, preview, and launch bonuses, head to shekhasingh.com/unburnableambition and sign up today. Now let's dive into today's episode. Our guest for today is Jim Carlough. I had such a fun time talking to Jim about leadership, traits of leadership, and what makes a good and a bad leader. Jim Carlough has a unique ability of blending humor, charisma, and real-world leadership insights into every conversation and project he works on. Jim delves into the insights of leaders shaping the future of business and personal development. He is a seasoned business strategist, a speaker, author of the book, The 6 Pillars of Effective Leadership, A Roadmap to Success. And when I asked him why 6, he told me a great story about how he ended up having actually 18, 12, and then ended up having the 6 pillars. And you know what was interesting about the 6 pillars of effective leadership? Humor was one of the pillars. You know how we've always been taught that leaders are born, not made? He is a myth buster and he says leaders can be made. And to put it in his words, he says leaders aren't born, they're developed. I benefited from this discussion being a leader myself, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to implement everything that Jim taught me during this episode. And I hope you're going to find it useful too. Let's get started. So there you go, everybody. Today we have with us Jim Carlough. Welcome to our show, Jim. How have you been?
I've been great. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Actually, I should thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule, Jim. But let's just dive right in and let's get the most out of you today. So tell us something about your book. I want to know what those 6 pillars are.
Okay, so let me give you the little bit of a backstory first, because it started off with a list of like 18 items.
Oh, wow.
But a couple of years ago, I sat down and I said, what am I going to do when I retire in a couple of years? And I said, because I can't go fishing every day. I'm not mentally, I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. And so I do enjoy fishing. So I don't want to upset any fisher people out there, but I do enjoy fishing. But doing it every day, I don't think I could tolerate. So I started thinking, how could I give back? And one of the things I've done for the last 30 some years is I've done a lot of mentoring of people, especially up and coming leaders or people who got into leadership. One of the things that we see a lot is people are great individual contributors, and a company will go to them and say, hey, Jim, we want to make you a manager. Yeah. And you get all excited, you say yes, but nobody gives you a roadmap of the things you need to know.
Right.
So unless you studied some of those items in school, which most haven't, you need some of those things. So I started writing down a list of all of the characteristics that I thought were important in my leadership style, but also a list of those things that a lot of the other people that I've mentored didn't have.
Right.
And when I came up with that list, it was somewhere between 15 or 18. I said, I can't write a book about implementing 15 items that, A, it would be too thick, and B, nobody's going to implement it.
Yeah.
So I narrowed it down, and it just ironically landed on 6. I couldn't get to 5. I tried, but I narrowed it down. And so there are 6 pillars, and they are integrity, which to me is non-negotiable in leadership or in life, compassion, empathy, stability, focus, and the last one is humor. And that usually gets a response, the raised eyebrows, just like you just did. But it's not being a stand-up comedian. So it's, I don't expect somebody to read this book and go having, rookie night at the laugh-off place, the comedy place. Mm-hmm. It's really using humor to diffuse tense situations, get people to refocus on what you're talking about. Right. And usually it's because people are hypersensitive these days, it's usually self-deprecating humor, meaning I'm talking about stupid things that I've done.
Yes.
And there's plenty of that I can talk about. But those are the 6 pillars.
Oh, wow. Amazing. This is great. I cannot wait to dive into each of them. But before I do that, since you've done so much research, Jim, and you've mentored a lot of people, I want to know what's the most common block that leaders face in today's day and age?
I think there's 2 things. I think from a point of getting into leadership, they're fearful that they don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
And then the most common mistake I see in new leaders is they show up the first day and tell everybody what's going to be different when they should be just showing up the first day and listening. And that's the first common mistake. And that gets new leaders off to a very poor start with their team and their organization. So for anybody who's a new leader, I hear you, but it's very, very important to listen first. Correct.
I 100% agree. Nobody likes a person who's brand new coming to the team and, just twirling their whip around and they're saying, okay, I want this. I don't want this. Let's change this and that. Agreed. Jim, I am curious to know, again, in my 11 years of experience, I have seen and worked with different kinds of leaders. Again, mostly North America. But there are certain people who stand out and they sometimes don't follow things by the book, which is why sometimes, they stand out because their style is different. The way of handling things is different. Now, when someone looks up to them, what would you suggest to, young people and young leaders out there who look at 1 out of 100 people like these and go, okay, you know what? I want to be like that person. 1, is it attainable? 2, are you doing the right thing using that person as a role model?
So instead of role model, I want to use the word mentor.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit different than when I think of role model. I think of a professional athlete or an actor or actress or somebody like that. And that's just my thinking. But in terms of a mentor, I typically recommend for people to pick mentors who are not their manager.
Okay.
A manager, if you're still working for that manager may be more biased to their own personal thinking and will push you in that direction versus you developing your own style. One of the things, you've heard the old adage that leaders are born that way.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Okay.
I'm a myth buster. So in my family, there's no CEOs, no presidents, no CFOs, none. My dad was a carpenter. His dad was a mason. And his dad, or my great-grandfather, was a chicken farmer. Right. There's no CEO there. So I've been in leadership my entire professional career, and I don't have that gene of being a leader. I had to develop it. And it's been a lifelong, really, journey because to me, and you know this as well, leadership evolves.
Yes.
And it changes as we all change. In fact, I had a podcaster ask me a few months back, just tell me how you are different today than when you were first a leader. Well, I graduated college in 1983.
Wow.
So I'm a little bit older than you are and a lot of bit older than you are. But in 1983, we were still managing more authoritarian style of leadership and dictating orders and requests or requirements of what you had to accomplish today or this week. That's not how we lead today.
Correct.
And in fact, when I answered that question, I paused and I said to the podcast host, I said, I really owe that first group of people that I managed an apology.
Oh.
Because I would not lead that way today.
Correct.
And it's just very, very different. And that's how it evolves and changes. And I think for new leaders, you have to understand it's a never-ending journey, correct, leadership, and it's always evolving. The one thing that I do hear a lot when I speak and also from mentors is they're very quick to tell me the leadership characteristics of the managers they didn't like. And ironically, it was those managers that lacked compassion and empathy and integrity and all of the things that are in my 6 pillars.
Right. Got it. Understood. Interesting, because I've always heard leaders are born, not made, but now here you are, you're trying to disrupt that. Wow. Okay. So if we take a hypothetical example, and let's say it's me, I do not have any intention of being a leader, but let's say I'm an amazing individual contributor. But for whatever reason, because I know the application really well, I've been with the company for X amount of time, I've been offered a leadership position. Now, suddenly, I have to rewire my brain and try to learn how to come up with responses to my team members that are not A, offensive, B, I cannot go around saying, are you stupid? Why can't you figure it out? It's simple. And C, stop complaining, just do the job. So, what would you suggest is someone like me in that situation who's thrown into the leadership position and now has to face all these things?
I would urge them, A, to find a mentor, somebody they look up to that's not their manager, who can give them advice and guidance.
Okay.
I've had multiple mentors in my professional career, and I owe a lot to them for who I am today and how I lead and how I manage. So that's number one. I'm a very strong promoter of mentoring programs,
Nice.
and especially companies who have mentoring programs, because those companies get it. I view my job isn't just delivering financial results. My job is also creating the next generation of leadership.
Yes.
And I take that job very seriously. And so getting mentors is critical, number one. And number two, start reading and learning about leadership styles. One thing about my book is it's not just about me and my journey. It's about the things that I've learned. But I do 3 things in the book. I talk about the pillar and why it's important. I also give examples of how to implement that pillar.
Nice.
But the third thing I do is I give references of other people that the reader will know that exemplifies that particular pillar. So, for example, integrity, the first one on my list in my book is Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft.
Yes.
When he took over, I think it was 2014, he instilled integrity, not that they lacked it at Microsoft, but he instilled integrity as a key component of his management style.
Right.
And he has never wavered from that. And it has dramatically changed the culture at Microsoft. And so in my book, you can find other people that then you can go read about how they're managing and leading. So I've really condensed the book so that it's implementable and not filled with a lot of fluff.
Right.
But it gives things that people can then take action on or also look up and research.
Got it. Okay. Understood. All right. So all new leaders out there, if you are in such situations, go check out Jim's book. It's going to be helpful for you all to navigate this transition from being an individual contributor to a brand new leader. Amazing. Thank you, Jim. All right, moving on. Let's get back to the humor pillar of it, because that sounds fun and that sounds interesting. Not that the others are not. I personally would love to learn more about empathy, because I feel that's what certain people lack in today's day and age. But we'll get to that. Okay, humor. You mentioned self-deprecating humor, but certain people have this idea in their head that if they crack certain kind of jokes or self-deprecate themselves, then they might lose that authority over their peers, or they can be taken lightly. And I was on this podcast interview with Regina Huber, actually, and she said that good leaders need to be vulnerable in order to connect with their team members. So where does humor come into play?
I think it still comes into play wherever they see the need to have it, only because we are human. Leaders are human. And the fact that I can humanize myself and get somebody to chuckle over it and get them to refocus to what we're talking about, then we all succeed and lead.
Mm.
We are too stressed out in corporate America, in the corporate world of North America. And as I tell my team all the time, we are not open heart surgeons. It does not have to be, we don't need an answer in 30 seconds. There's nobody that's on the table that's going to die if we don't take action right now. And usually people look at me oddly or they chuckle like you did. But the reality is, that is the reality. We're not open heart surgeons.
Yeah.
And so let's figure this out. And if we have to, have fun with it, we have fun with it. What's coming to mind is about 10 years ago, I had two women who were managers who worked for me. Gender really doesn't matter, but they were also close friends outside of work.
Right.
And they were having a conflict outside of my office. And I went out to hear what was going on, and I could see them getting escalated and more agitated with each other. And it was hard for me to see. So I forget what I said, but I know it was self-deprecating because they looked at me both shocked and they both laughed. But then I invited them into my office. And once I got them to sit down and diffused using humor, I was able to listen to their concerns. And they were both trying to solve the same customer problem.
Mm.
And they both were wrapped around the axle about their own beliefs of what would do it. When in reality, if they would have thought about combining the two things they were talking about, they would have had the perfect solution. And I showed them that they were not seeing the forest through the trees. One of them got emotional and started to cry. And I asked her what was wrong. And she said, "Why are you always right?" And I said, "I'm not always right." And she said, "No, you are always right." And I'm like, "No, I make a lot of mistakes." And
Right.
she said, "But you're not making one now." And I said, "No, because I'm not involved emotionally like you two are.
Right.
You're involved in this emotional thing right now that one of you has to be right. And in reality, you're both right. Now combine those two things and go fix the problem."
Right. Funny how you put it that way, because I have been in that situation too. And yes, when you are working with a friend or a coworker who you've become close to, when it comes to solving a problem, you know how brilliant the other person is, but then you also know that you are equally brilliant. But that's interesting. I think I need to implement that more, where I figure out, okay, let's combine everything and then see what happens, and then we'll take it from there. That's interesting. Okay, let's talk about conflict management, Jim. I see that even good leaders who have a lot of work experience and have been in leadership positions for a while, like you said, the example that you gave was when you first started, the style was completely different. And now leadership styles have changed. But there are often times where I notice that people who've been in great positions also sometimes lack empathy. And they are so fast to just dismiss things. And sometimes it's all in the details. Like if you would have seen it from a different perspective, then maybe things would have been different. What's your take on this?
So I agree. I think as a leader, I have the responsibility of being able to identify when someone on my team is having an off day.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say an off day. It could be bad, may not be miserable, but an off day. And even in the world we live in now where people are remote, it still is in my best interest and in that person's best interest for me to be able to sense when there's something going on that's different. And then to be able to inject and find a way to help them through that. Correct. I can't solve it for them potentially, but I can help them through that. And so I think that's a big part of being an effective leader, is being able to show empathy or being able to show compassion. But it's very, very hard to learn because there's not a good book that does that. It's only really through experience and learning from others. Right. And I often tell the story on empathy, and it's in my book. I was running, one of my responsibilities back in the 2000 to 2007 era I worked for a technology company, and I had multiple teams under me, one of which was a team that was responsible for developing and maintaining a healthcare claim platform that was green screen technology.
Okay.
We had already introduced Windows-based claim systems, and we were working to even improve those even more. And we made the decision that we would migrate the customers from the green screen technology over to the Windows technology over a 3-year period. And I had to tell these people that their jobs would be effectively going away at some point. And I didn't know what to say to them.
Right.
And I struggled. And as each day got closer to when I was supposed to meet with the team, and it was about 25 on the team, I had a couple of sleepless nights, and I couldn't figure out how can I help them through this, because I had a responsibility to still support the customers until they converted.
Yeah.
Implementations would take 8 to 12 for 14 months. But if I was to tell you your job's going away, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to update your resume.
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford to do that. I mean, I couldn't afford to have anybody do that, because it would leave us with an inability to support the customers.
Right.
So I came up with 3 things. And I finally said, what would I want my boss to tell me if my job was going away? So I made them 3 promises. The first promise is that each person would get as much notice as feasibly possible, but in no case would it be less than 8 months notice, because we would know when a client's transitioning, except in the case if the client terminated their contract and went with a competitor. Then it might be shorter. So that was the first commitment. They would have as much notice as physically possible. The second thing I promised them was that if they wanted to stay with the company, I would make the training available so that they could learn the new products and services and technologies, so they could move from being an engineer over here to an engineer over here when the time came, if they wanted to.
Yeah.
If they didn't want to stay in that role, I would find them a role within the organization that would be comparable to what they were doing today, wherever that may be.
Wow.
I made a third promise. If anybody decided they didn't want to be with the organization, I would help them find a job that was commensurate with what they were doing on the outside of the organization. My sole goal was to not have anybody quit before it was time.
Right.
I was successful. But something else happened. About a year and a half later, I get a call from Human Resources. And they asked me if they could come and see me, which is never a good conversation. If HR wants to come and see you, it's not a good situation.
Correct.
I said, okay, but I was relieved when they came by themselves and they didn't have my boss with them with an empty box. So I knew at that point it wasn't going to be bad. But they sat down and they said, we need to talk to you about something.
Okay.
And I said, what? And they said, well, we did an employee survey a month ago for the whole company. I said, yes. She said, I need to talk to you about that software group out in California that you manage. I went, oh boy, this can't be good.
Right.
And they said, well, it actually is. They're the happiest employees in the whole company.
Oh, wow.
There are 20,000 people in this company, and that group had the highest satisfaction of any team in the entire organization. And they said, aren't you getting rid of those people? And I said, well, I'm trying to help them find jobs. I'm not displacing them. There's a plan. And when I told them what the plan was, they were like, no wonder they're happy.
Mm-hmm.
You've taken all the worry away from them.
Yeah.
You, in essence, have said, I have your back. I need you, but you're going to know what your runway is to find a new job, and you're going to help them do that?
Correct.
We need to write this down, because we need to be telling leaders that that's how you show empathy, and that's what we want you to do with your employees to protect them.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That is courageous, first of all. And second, I think it takes a lot of strength and trust in your own self, Jim, that you can go and tell a team of 25 people that I've got your back. Yeah, kudos to you for doing that. And that speaks a lot about who you are as a leader and what you've done, and adds to your credibility too. Because that one thing where you told them, I will give you notice, but not just that, I will also make sure that you get a job elsewhere. That is taking off 99% of the tension from everybody's head, because everyone has mortgages or bills to pay, family, so many different things that we have no idea about. And you were like, okay, I've got you. Don't worry about it. No wonder they were so happy. That's awesome.
But that's our job as leaders.
Yeah. I feel like that's where certain leaders fail. And again, I know there are good leaders, there are bad leaders, and there are okay leaders too. But I feel everyone at some point or the other should be responsible completely to have their teams back. Even if you don't want to do it behind the scenes, tell them, I've got your back. And then at least try to do something what you told them. For example, if you're on a team and something's gone really bad, I don't want to give specific examples, but this happened with me. What happened was, another client finished our contract with our company and laid off X amount of people. And that news was communicated to the entire organization. And my team started to get really anxious. And so everyone, like, oh, are we losing our job? What's happening? Are we okay? Are we safe? Should we go start updating our resumes? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I've heard this news exactly at the same time as you guys did. So I have no clue either, but don't worry about it. We'll sort things out. And I feel like everybody just needs to listen to that one sentence that leaders tell them, hey, you're okay. Don't worry, we've got your back. Even if anything happens, we will make sure we will put you on a different project or find something for you. And I think that says tons about a person as a leader. And you actually did that. So that's awesome.
And I totally agree with you. I think these are things that it's hard to teach people.
Yes.
And it's until you experience it, you really can't understand the impact that you're having.
Correct.
And I certainly didn't realize it. I was just, ironically, I was being selfish because I didn't want to fail by losing people and not being able to support customers, which is, generating revenue for the organization. But it worked out.
I have an interesting question for you, Jim. How can leaders handle emotions? Let's say I report to you, okay? And I come to you one day. Every day I'm cheerful all the time. I have a smile on my face on the calls, on the meetings, everything. But this one day I come to you and we have a one-on-one, and I am either crying at one point or am very angry at one point. Now, knowing what you know about me and my performance, how would you handle that situation and what would you tell me?
It would depend on what the underlying concern was, but I would approach it with asking you, look, I can sense something's concerning you. I'd like to talk about that if that's possible, and basically ask for permission to inquire what is it that you're struggling with, and maybe I can help.
Yeah.
And try to understand that, I may or may not be able to help, but I want to try to help, because the reality is, if you're having an off day, it's going to impact your ability to do the things you're responsible for.
Correct.
And, and then that all has a flow down effect to other people somewhere in the organization. So a leader has to be intuitive to be able to notice when somebody's having a bad day. And it doesn't necessarily mean when they come into your office and sit down in your example, but as you're walking around and you're seeing people, or you're having a Zoom call, if you see somebody on this, in the audience there, your coworkers, in the background going, like this, and that's something you need to check out.
Yeah.
It's funny. Last week I was having a call, and I had all of these screens with these people, and I was telling them something important, and I had one person going like this, and I called them out, and I said, Dan, I said, is everything okay? And he said, yes, why? I said, well, this is pretty important, but I see a bobblehead. He says, well, I've got 6 screens and I'm dual tasking. And I said, well, I said, can you give me just 2 minutes to get through this?
Right.
Because this is pretty important, the stuff that I'm talking about. And I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask me questions about it.
Right.
And so leaders have to be that intuitive to be able to see if that person's dual tasking, they're not going to hear everything that I'm saying.
Yeah.
And especially if it's something important. And in this case, it was. So I didn't mean to call him out, but I wanted him to make sure that if I'm distracted, I'm sure other people are by what he was doing.
Correct.
And so in your situation where we're meeting and we're doing the one-on-one, again, I'm going to ask for permission to dive into it. And then, and if you say to me, well, I really don't like the decision you made yesterday, this is it, I'm going to say, well, can we talk about it?
Yeah.
What about my decision didn't you like? Well, I didn't think it was fair. Okay, let's talk about that. What would have been, because I make mistakes. I admit that. I'm not perfect, but I want to make sure that I call myself out on that if I have made a mistake. Yeah. And if in that conversation we determine I may have made a mistake, I need to figure out how to unwind what I said yesterday. That's what a good leader has to do. Right. Or if it's something that, you need help with and I'm not, at the end of every one-on-one I have, I typically say, when I remember, is there anything you're not getting from me that you need?
Yeah.
And a lot of it's always good for a leader to check. It's our responsibility to make sure you're successful. It's our responsibility to make sure you have everything you need to do your job. Because if I call you in and say, hey, you're not doing your job, that's a different conversation. And I don't think we want to go down that path. Right. So that's why leaders have to be intuitive to be able to notice when these things are going on and be able to react to it.
Correct.
And not afraid to dive into them.
I agree. I feel the minute the other person starts to show raw emotions, some people who are in leadership positions just shut down. And they have like this big barrier where they don't know what to do or how to handle that situation. I've seen my husband, my sister, and myself too. Sometimes you really need time to frame a proper sentence when the other person across you is raw, is showing emotions, and is in a very different state than you are. And no matter what you do, everything has to be carefully thought of and presented in a way that the other person understands and then collects themselves. At least that's what I've learned through my experience. You know how you said, like, at the end of the day, all of us are humans. Everybody is a human and we have emotions, we have everything. It's just that practice and experience is what it takes to deal with that kind of situation.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And it's hard to find all that stuff in a book.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so true. 100% true. I read a lot of books. I was in that position too. I have been an excellent individual contributor. And there are times, trust me, there are times when I feel like, why am I doing this? And I feel like, I would have been amazing just being heads down with my work, giving what they asked for, and be like, okay, is this working? Yes or no? Here it is. It's working. Here, it's not working. I'm working on this. It's going to be done by X day. But now I have to rewire my brain every time I have a one-on-one with someone, or when I'm wearing that leadership hat, because it's totally different from being an individual contributor. And like you said, it comes through a lot of practice. And I teach that. Like you said, having a mentor is so important. I've had mentors in my life, and I tell this to everyone. If my younger siblings or, whoever's heard a podcast, they come to me like, how can we do this? First thing I say, get yourself a mentor, because when you have a certain someone to go to who's way more experienced than you are, who's seen a lot more things than you have, you will know what to do. Even if they don't give you direct directions, you at least know who to go to. There's someone that you can talk to when it comes to certain situations that you're in. So I agree. Thank you so much for these amazing suggestions and tips, Jim. These are really helpful.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad it resonates with you.
And actionable, in my opinion. I know integrity, 100%. Right now, with remote work, especially, I have noticed that a lot of people, especially the ones who are not used to working remotely, take it for granted. And they take it for granted at a different level where, as a leader, you feel maybe you've just given them too much leeway. Maybe you should have been strict, or, maybe you should have held certain boundaries from the beginning. But then at the end of the day, you see other 9 people on your team, and then you see this one person, and it's clear that it's them and it's not a you problem or your leadership style problem. So I agree. I think that goes both ways, not just the leader, but also the other people on the team. If you hold yourself accountable and if you're doing your job with integrity, then I feel it's easy. It's easy for both the parties.
I totally agree with that. I remember my parents when I was a kid would say, it's very difficult to tell the same lie twice, right? So, don't lie, tell the truth from the get-go.
Correct.
And it's, that simple statement's fairly valuable.
Correct. 100%. Well, thank you so much for this amazing discussion, Jim, and for your pointers. So thank you so much for being a guest on our show, Jim.
I'm glad I was here. In fact, I will send you a copy of the book. And so just send me your address. But I want to offer a couple of books out to your audience, if that's okay with you.
Definitely, yes.
And so I will give away 3 books, autographed copies of my book, to the first 3 people who comment on this episode on one of your social media platforms. Now, folks, when you comment, do not put your address out on social media. We'll be able to reach back out to you in the comments and we'll get your address somehow and we'll ship you the book. But please don't post it on social media. So where would you like them to post the comments?
YouTube.
So post when this episode is produced, comment on YouTube, and the first 3 people will get a copy of my book autographed. And it doesn't matter what you say. What we're looking for is feedback. How did we do? What did you get from it? And was it helpful? And for the first 3 people, we'll send you a copy of the book. How's that sound?
Incredible. Love it. Thank you so much, Jim.
Well, thank you for having me. And let me know if you ever would like me to come back. I'd be more than happy to continue the discussion.
Of course. Of course, will do. Thank you, Jim.
Again, thank you.
To everybody who's listening to this episode, Jim Carlough has decided to ship out 3 autographed copies of his book to the first 3 people that comment on my social media on this episode. So go to YouTube, find Jim Carlough's episode, and add a comment. Give us feedback about how you felt, and I will reach out to you. Thank you for tuning in for today's episode of Rise and Tell with Sheekha. My upcoming book, Unburnable Ambition, is all about how to chase your biggest goals without losing yourself to burnout. You can now sign up at sheekasingh.com/unburnableambition for early access and launch updates. Until next time, keep growing, keep glowing, and be yourself, and keep your ambition unburnable. Thank you.